I never shouted. That's the first thing people should know about the night everything changed. On a humid Saturday in late June 2022, I walked into a waterfront venue in Cleveland with labeled envelopes in my hand and a folded seating chart in my tote bag. I'm 53 years old, a project manager by training and by temperament, and I believe in arriving early, confirming details, and keeping things squared away before guests arrive. The elevator was supposed to take me to the 4th floor where the event office was located. Instead, it stopped on the 2nd floor first. The doors slid open to a small, dim lounge with blue lighting and music that vibrated through the floor. That's where I saw my son David, 28 years old, laughing on a leather banquette while a young woman in a red dress danced close in front of him. The woman was Lila. She was my best friend's daughter. Everyone there was a consenting adult over the age of 21. But the sight landed like a pin driven into a balloon. I didn't call out. I didn't step forward. I held the elevator door with one hand, took a mental photograph, and let the door close again. The envelopes stayed in my hand. By the time I reached the 4th floor, I already knew I would write everything down. Marion Holt had been widowed for 11 years, and in that time she had learned to manage more than grief. She had learned to manage information. Her late husband had been an engineer who believed in documentation, and she had absorbed his discipline without sentimentality. Her kitchen table often held labeled folders, printouts clipped with care, and legal pads with lists organized by priority. People who knew her casually thought of her as neat and reliable. People who worked with her understood that she was something more, methodical, precise, and very difficult to surprise. That Saturday evening, after dropping the final payments at the venue office, she drove home in silence. The streets were humid and soft with summer heat, the kind that makes asphalt shimmer and car interiors smell like warm plastic. She did not call David. She did not text Tessa, her best friend of nearly 30 years. Instead, she parked in her usual spot, climbed the stairs to her modest duplex apartment, and sat at the kitchen island with a glass of water and a yellow legal pad. At the top of the page, she wrote the date, June 25, 2022. Below that, she listed what she had seen: 2nd floor lounge. Blue lights. 2 security guards near the bar. Red dress. Leather banquette against the west wall. Timestamp on phone, 8:37 p.m. She did not editorialize. She did not write how she felt. She simply recorded the facts, folded the page in half, and slid it into a plain manila folder. On the tab, she wrote the date in black ink. Then she set the folder on the corner of her desk and went to bed. By Monday morning, the details were already on paper, and Marion was ready to look backward. She made coffee in the same blue mug she had used for a decade, sat at the island, and opened a second legal pad. This one was for patterns. Over the past several months, small inconsistencies had begun to accumulate like dust on a surface no one bothered to wipe. David had started taking phone calls in the garage, a habit he had never had before. He would excuse himself mid-conversation with a casual, "back in a sec," then disappear for 10 or 15 minutes. When he returned, his tone was always lighter, as though he had shaken something off. His fiancée, Erin, had also changed. She was 27, a licensed vocational nurse working toward her registered nurse certification, and she had always been the kind of person who brought a planner to family dinners. She took notes on everything: grocery lists, appointment reminders, gift ideas for distant relatives. But over the past 2 months, the planner had stopped appearing. When someone asked about wedding logistics, Erin would smile faintly and say, "We'll confirm later." The phrase had become a refrain. Tessa, too, had developed new rhythms. She was 56, a former real estate agent who now worked intermittently as a consultant for small property management firms. She had always been social, the kind of friend who organized group brunches and knew everyone's schedule. But recently, her invitations had shifted. She began joining happy hours just for an hour, then sending late-night texts. "You up? Call me." Marion would respond in the morning, "Everything okay?" and Tessa's replies were always breezy. "All good." Marion wrote all of this down. She did not yet know what it meant, but she had learned that patterns speak before people do. That afternoon, she retrieved the venue invoice from her email archive. The original booking had been straightforward: a private dining room on the 4th floor, a fixed menu for 18 guests, a bar tab capped at $800, and a small dessert station. The total had been agreed upon in April, paid in 2 installments, and marked complete. But when Marian opened the final invoice, sent 3 days after the Bachelor dinner, she saw a new line item. Supplemental lounge access, 2nd floor. Code issued, June 20th, 8:41 p.m. Fee, $250. Authorized card ending in 3792. She printed the page. She circled the line in pencil. Then she opened her records and cross-checked the card digits. The number matched a credit card Tessa had used to split a hotel booking the previous year. Marian folded the printout and added it to the folder. People tell themselves in receipts, she thought. You just have to listen to the paper. The next step was simple. Ask the venue what the file already knew. On Wednesday afternoon, Marian returned to the waterfront venue carrying a small bakery box tied with string. Inside were 6 chocolate chip cookies, individually wrapped. She had learned over the years that gratitude opens doors more reliably than demands. The event manager who met her was a man in his mid-40s named Eric, efficient and polite. He had coordinated the Bachelor dinner booking, and when Marian greeted him with the cookies and a warm smile, he seemed genuinely pleased. I wanted to make sure everything was in order, Marian said. Final headcount, final charges. Just for my records. Of course, Eric replied. He gestured toward his desk, where a desktop monitor glowed softly in the dim office. Let me pull up your file. He clicked through several screens, then tapped a line on the invoice. Here's the supplemental charge. 2nd floor lounge access. It was added day of, requested by someone in your party. Do you have the authorization details? Marian asked. Her tone was light, conversational. Sure. Eric opened a second window. Verified by the last 4 digits of the card on file, 3792. The request came in around 7:45 that evening. The code was activated at 8:41. Marian nodded. Could I get a copy of the signed addendum? And the access log, if it's available. Just for my records. Eric glanced at her, then shrugged. No problem. Give me a second. The printer in the corner hummed to life. 2 pages emerged, the addendum, signed digitally with a timestamp, and the access log, showing the exact moment the code was scanned at the 2nd floor entrance. Marian accepted both pages, folded them carefully, and tucked them into a plain white envelope she had brought for exactly this purpose. Thank you, she said. You've been very helpful. Outside, the afternoon sun was high and bright, the lake gray and flat beneath a cloudless sky. Marian walked to a bench near the water and sat for several minutes, the envelope resting on her lap. She thought about Christmas, Lila waving cheerfully over a tray of homemade cookies, Tessa announcing with pride, she's taking a gap year to figure things out, adults make their own choices, Marian reminded herself. But deliberate choices leave trails. That evening, she returned home and opened David's tablet. He had given her the passcode years earlier, during a family trip when he needed her to check his flight confirmation while he was driving. The gesture had been casual, trusting. She had never used it for anything else until now. The Bachelor group chat was still open in the messaging app. Marian scrolled carefully, reading only the preview text visible on the main screen. Near the top of the thread, dated June 23rd, was a short exchange. 2nd floor swing at 8:30. T will book. No other context. No names. Just the letter T and a time that matched the access log exactly. Marian did not take a screenshot. She did not forward the message. Instead, she returned to her desk, opened the folder, and wrote a single line on a fresh sheet of paper. Message confirms venue records. Group chat, June 23rd. She dated the memo, filed it under the tab labeled Messages, and closed the folder. By the end of that week, the folder had dividers. Marian worked in her home office on Friday evening, the kind of quiet, methodical work that had always calmed her. She labeled each section with a small adhesive tab: Venue, Messages, Finances, Wedding Gifts, On a blank page at the front, she wrote a new heading, Boundaries. Beneath it, she wrote one name, Erin. Erin deserved information, not a spectacle. She deserved time to make her own decisions without a public ambush or a wedding day confrontation. Marian had always believed that clarity was a form of respect, and that silence, when strategic, could be the kindest intervention. She called Ruth Delgado on Saturday morning. Ruth was 61, an estate attorney who had drafted the family trust that held the duplex David was set to inherit. She was steady, discreet, and entirely unsentimental about legal structure. "I'd like to schedule a review," Marian said. "Nothing urgent. Mid-July is fine." Ruth's voice was dry and knowing. "Meaning now?" "Meaning soon." "I'll draft some options," Ruth replied. "We can tighten it." The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. By Monday, Marian had an appointment scheduled for the following Thursday. That same weekend, Marian logged into the joint wedding gift account she had established with Tessa and 2 other close family friends. The account had been her idea, a pooled fund to cover honeymoon travel, a furniture allowance, and a small emergency reserve for the couple's first year of marriage. She had set up automatic monthly transfers of $200, which had been running since January. She paused the transfers. Then she opened a separate account, naming it simply, Erin K. Professional Development Fund. She seeded it with $3,000 and wrote a memo for her own records, for certification fees, exam preparation courses, and 6 months' rent if needed. She left the account unannounced, properly documented, and filed the confirmation page under the Finances tab. Quiet support is still support, she thought. On Tuesday, she returned to the venue once more, this time with a specific request. She asked Eric, politely, if she could obtain a copy of the entertainment contract associated with the lounge booking. She explained that she was compiling a full record of the event for insurance purposes, a minor fabrication, but delivered calmly enough that Eric did not question it. "Give me a day," he said. By Wednesday afternoon, Marian had the contract. It listed Lila Martin as a freelance performer, hired through a third-party booking service that provided entertainment for private events. The contract included her signed consent form, her performer ID number, and a liability waiver. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. Everything was the choice of an adult. Marian read it twice, then filed it under a new tab she labeled simply, Facts. At the top of the page, she wrote in neat capital letters, Facts, not feelings. The first conversation would be private, brief, and complete. On Wednesday morning, Marian met Erin at a small cafe near the hospital where Erin worked. It was a quiet place known for strong coffee and round wooden tables that felt more like a library than a restaurant. Marian arrived early and chose a corner table away from the windows. When Erin entered, she looked tired. Her scrubs were rumpled from a long shift, and her hair was pulled into a functional ponytail. She smiled when she saw Marian, but the smile was thin. "Thanks for meeting me," Marian said. Of course, Erin sat down and set her phone face down on the table. "Is everything okay?" Marian slid a plain white envelope across the table. "I want you to see a few things." Erin opened the envelope slowly. Inside were 2 documents, the venue addendum and the timestamped access log. She read them in silence, her expression shifting from confusion to stillness. When she finished, she set the papers down carefully and looked at Marian. "What is this?" "It's what happened on June 25th, Marian said. Her voice was calm, factual. "The story David told you about that night may not match the receipts." Erin's jaw tightened slightly. "Who arranged this?" "Tessa." The silence between them lasted several seconds. Marian did not elaborate. She did not mention the performance, the red dress, or the group chat message. She simply let the document speak. Finally, Erin folded the papers and returned them to the envelope. "Thank you," she said quietly. That was all. Marian left the cafe feeling neither victorious nor relieved. She felt only the quiet certainty that the first step had been taken. 2 days later, she met with Ruth Delgado at a small law office near the county courthouse. Ruth's desk was neat and spare, with a single framed photograph of a garden and a brass lamp that cast warm light across stacks of binders. "Walk me through it," Ruth said. Marian explained the timeline, the lounge, the invoice, the addendum, the trust structure David was set to inherit. She kept her tone even, transactional. Ruth listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a yellow pad. When Marian finished, Ruth leaned back in her chair. "What do you want to accomplish?" "I want the duplex to remain in trust," Marian said. "With conditions. 5 years of stable marriage before transfer. Rental income directed into a reserve account that Aaron can audit for maintenance transparency. No exceptions." Ruth nodded. "That's fair. Auditable and protective. Anything else?" "I want Tessa removed as my medical proxy. I'll replace her with my sister." "Done. And I want to close a bookkeeping contract my business has with Tessa's consulting firm. 30 days notice, every cent paid in full. Clean separation." Ruth made another note. "We can draft that today." Finally, Marian continued, "I want the honeymoon payment converted to escrow. Both parties complete a premarital financial disclosure, or the funds remain frozen." Ruth looked up. "You understand that's a significant step." "I do." "Then I'll draft it." The meeting lasted 40 minutes. By the time Marian left, she had signed the updated trust, authorized the medical proxy change, and approved the closeout memo for Tessa's contract. Every action was documented, timed, and filed. On Friday afternoon, Marian called Alan Cho, the accountant who managed her small business ledger. Alan was 49, methodical, and allergic to ambiguity. "I need to terminate the bookkeeping contract with Tessa Martin's firm," Marian said. 30 days notice. Pay everything owed through the final date. No arrears, no penalties." Alan was silent for a moment. "Any issue I should know about?" "No issue," Marian replied. "Just a clean closure." "Understood. I'll process it today." The memo line on the final payment read simply, "Contract closed. Thank you for your work." When Marian informed David about the new trust conditions, she did so over the phone, keeping her tone steady and matter-of-fact. "I've updated the duplex trust," she said. "It will remain in trust for 5 years after your marriage. Rental income will go into a reserve account that Aaron can audit. It's a standard policy I use for all family transfers." David paused. "That's new." "It's protective," Marian replied. "For both of you." He didn't argue. "Okay. And the honeymoon fund is now in escrow. You and Aaron will need to complete a premarital financial disclosure before the funds are released." Another pause. "Is that necessary?" "I use it for everyone," Marian said calmly. "Including family." David sighed, then agreed. The conversation ended without conflict. Consequences arrived without announcement, first in a cafe, then at a diner. 2 weeks after Marian's meeting with Aaron, David asked his fiancée for a transparent conversation about the Bachelor dinner. It happened privately, in their small apartment, late on a Thursday evening. Marian was not present, but Aaron described it to her later in a brief, composed phone call. David admitted the lounge detour. He named Tessa as the person who arranged it. "I didn't think it mattered," he said. Aaron's reply was simple, "It does to me." They attended one counseling session with a pastor Aaron had known since college. No ultimatums were issued. No threats were made. But the ceremony itself began to change. Aaron requested modifications. No garter toss, no speeches from friends, only short toasts from immediate family. "It will be quieter," she told Marian. "That's what I need." In the broader friend group, news moved on its own, without Marian's involvement. She had shared the documents with only 2 people, Aaron and, eventually, Mark Martin, Tessa's husband. Mark reached out on a Saturday afternoon, asking to meet. They chose a roadside diner halfway between their homes, a place with vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that tasted of old warmth. Mark was 58, a civil engineer with graying hair and the quiet demeanor of someone who measured twice and cut once. He sat across from Marian with his hands folded on the table. "Tessa won't tell me what happened," he said. "But I know something did." Marian opened the folder she had brought and removed 2 pages, the venue addendum and the access log. She placed them on the table between them. Mark read slowly. When he finished, he rubbed his forehead with one hand, then looked up. I had no idea. I believe you, Marian said. He folded the papers and handed them back. I'll handle my house. Thank you. Mark picked up the check, left cash on the table, and stood. Before leaving, he said one final thing. Thank you for showing me. That night, the group chat went silent. By morning, Marian had quietly removed Tessa from the florist coordination thread and reimbursed her for a centerpiece deposit she had covered months earlier. The message was brief: reimbursing your contribution, thank you. Tessa did not reply. On the afternoon of the rehearsal, Marian arrived at the venue early and parked far from the main entrance. She carried the printed programs in a canvas tote and wore a plain linen dress, beige and unremarkable. As she walked toward the doors, a distant relative intercepted her near the steps. The woman's expression was eager, her mouth already forming the first syllable of a question. Marian smiled gently and said, "Let's keep today clean." The woman blinked, then nodded. Of course. Inside, the rehearsal proceeded on schedule. The pastor reviewed the processional order. David and Aaron stood side by side, their postures careful but not cold. When the coordinator asked if anyone had questions, no one spoke. The room held a disciplined quiet, the kind that comes not from fear but from agreement. Afterward, Marian drove home alone, the sun low and golden over the lake. The folder was no longer on her desk. It was filed in a drawer, labeled and dated, ready if needed but no longer urgent. Only the wedding remained, short, careful, and unadorned. The ceremony took place on a mild Sunday in mid-July. The sky was pale blue, softened by thin clouds, and the temperature held steady in the mid-70s. The venue was the same waterfront location, but this time the event was held in a small garden courtyard on the ground level, open air, simple white chairs, no elaborate staging. Marian arrived 30 minutes early and sat in the second row. She wore a tailored navy dress and carried a small clutch. Around her, guests filtered in quietly: David's coworkers, Aaron's nursing school friends, a few relatives from out of state. Tessa was not present. Mark attended alone, sitting near the back, his posture upright and composed. The ceremony was brief. The pastor spoke for less than 10 minutes. David and Aaron exchanged vows they had written themselves, short, personal, free of flourish. When the pastor pronounced them married, the applause was polite and warm. No one threw rice. No one shouted. After the photographs, Marian approached the couple near a stone fountain at the edge of the courtyard. She handed David a plain white envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Escrow confirmation," Marian said. "And a list of free counseling resources for newlyweds. For good days and bad." David opened the envelope briefly, then folded it and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He hugged his mother longer than usual, a gesture that communicated more than words. Aaron smiled and squeezed Marian's hand. "Thank you," Aaron said. Marian nodded. "Take care of each other." By autumn, the bookkeeping contract was fully closed. Alan had processed the final payment in August, and the ledger showed 0 arrears, 0 disputes, and a clean separation date. Marian received one message from Tessa in late September, sent via text: "Hope we can talk someday." Marian replied the next morning, "Wishing you peace." That was the whole truth. She did not wish Tessa harm. She did not wish for her suffering. She simply wished for her distance. In October, Erin sat for her registered nurse licensing exam. The transfer from the Professional Development Fund covered the exam fee, the review course, and 2 months of additional study materials. Erin passed on her first attempt. When she called to share the news, her voice was bright and steady. "I couldn't have done it without that account," she said. "You earned it," Marian replied. The duplex remained in trust, steady and unremarkable, its terms clear and enforceable. The rental income flowed into the reserve account each month, documented and audited. No disputes arose. The structure held. Marian did not replay the lounge scene often anymore. When the memory returned, usually late at night, when the house was quiet, it was not the blue lights or the red dress that she recalled most clearly. It was the moment the elevator doors closed. The soft mechanical hum. The darkness of the hallway. The weight of the envelope still in her hand. She remembered standing still, her pulse steady, her breath even. She remembered the decision forming beneath the silence, not to shout, not to rush, not to collapse the situation into noise and spectacle. She remembered choosing instead to document, to verify, to prepare. Sometimes the most honest sound is a door that closes softly. By winter, Marian had reorganized her home office. The folder remained in the drawer, but she rarely opened it. The legal pad sat empty on her desk, ready for the next project, the next list, the next quiet problem that required structure instead of emotion. One evening in December, she sat at the kitchen island with a cup of tea and looked out at the snow beginning to fall over the duplex courtyard. The lights in David and Aaron's unit were warm and steady. Smoke rose from the chimney. Through the window, she could see them moving in the kitchen, side by side, preparing dinner. She did not know what their future held. She did not know if the marriage would last 5 years, or 10, or 50. But she knew they had been given a factual start. They had been given clarity. And clarity, she believed, was the most solid foundation anyone could build on. The snow continued to fall, quiet and persistent. Marian finished her tea, rinsed the cup, and turned off the kitchen light. The house settled into stillness. Outside, the street lamps glowed soft and golden. She had done what needed doing. She had held the line. And now, like the snow, she could rest. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.